hopefully we can get a fairly good turnout tonight. We can sort of get some things resolved and meet the family's needs this year and move the needle, like I said, forward to try and get our kids in clinical trials and treatments and all those things that we also desperately are looking for.
So this is the first time I have been to a meeting like this. Do you all know one another and kind of know?
No, not really.
Okay.
Maybe we should take some time.
I just wasn't sure if if I should introduce myself if you all know one another, but I'm not sure how the meetings go.
So normally our meetings, we have a guest speaker and they kind of go through they've been very informational. But we just wanted to kind of regroup here at the beginning of the year to sort of lay out some of the things that we have done so far and sort of lay the roadmap for what we're looking to do in this year. So that's what this meeting is about. So
okay.
I sort of know, I know some of the people and I know of some of the people, but no. So you can go ahead and introduce yourself, Debbie, and tell us where you're from. And
okay. Yeah, sure. So I am from Michigan, and my 13-year-old daughter, we're still waiting for genetic testing results, but if she doesn't have FSHD, I have no idea what in the world could be going on, because she seems to fit it very well. She has, I don't know, I've had concerns about her posture for years. And just finally took her to a physiatrist since I'm going on my own, and she had to see a neurologist. So she knew, and I'm a physical therapist actually. And I don't know, it didn't occur to me that there could be, something like this happening. I actually knew for a long time she couldn't blow up a balloon, but she's, I don't know, an interesting child. I just thought it was some fluke thing, but now as I look back, I can just piece together so many things that I could attribute to this. So I guess that's kind of where we are, that she has a lot of symptoms. Her scapular muscles are absolutely awful, and that concerns me a lot. But right now we're honestly still kind of getting used to the diagnosis, and that's been very painful. And I think what we all have in common is we want something for our kids, and so I'm going to do whatever I can for this child of mine, and want the same thing for all of yours too.
Thank you. So she has been tested or?
Yeah, so she has been tested, but we haven't had the results yet. She did the in vitae panel, and that didn't come up with anything, which was kind of what we expected, assuming that she does have FSHD. And then it was kind of crazy timing, because on the same day we got the referral from our doctor for the University of Iowa test, and the packet for the Peter Jones lab one. My husband and I also did that one, so because we have 3 other kids, so we need to kind of see what's going on.
So have you gotten the results back from the Jones lab?
No, that was just a few days ago. So I guess it sounds like that maybe only takes a couple of weeks. So we're waiting for that, and then assume the other one will take a little bit longer. So yeah.
Okay. Well,
and I guess the other thing I just wanted to maybe mention is so my daughter's 13. I don't obviously know how old yours are. I don't know. Honestly, if she would have the early onset or the classic, because it seems like I feel like she's right at that edge of the the age of when I started seeing symptoms, and I don't know if that's how they diagnose or if it's the age of when the diagnosis is made. That's at some point, that's one thing I'd like to try to learn about.
So I would recommend, we have all of our meetings on YouTube, on the FSHD Society YouTube. So you can go back and look at there's a lot of great informational stuff on there, but basically the clinical diagnosis of early onset is like scapular winging before age 10, but all
Yeah.
parents are welcome here. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
it's
a lot
just,
of
it's
times these-
really hard because like she's had, the last two well visits, so at least when she was like 12 and 11, I was talking to the doctor about her posture. So I feel like that's like right when, you know, she had scapular winging, and she's never been able to blow up a balloon. So I guess, you know, she had facial weakness whenever kids can start, I don't know developmentally when they can blow up a balloon. So but I see so much now when I look at her. So yeah.
unfortunately, that seems to be a common theme we hear. Parents see the signs, but they take them to doctors, and doctors aren't familiar with FSH, and
Mm-hmm.
they sort of get misdiagnosed or looked over for years before they actually get a no kidding genetic or clinical diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll get some answers soon from either or both Peter Jones and from the blood test that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it doesn't matter what age, what age she was diagnosed at.
She's still a kid with she's
still
a
a
kid.
kid with FSH.
So that's like what you're saying. I mean, if something happens in the next few years, she's still going to be too young
right.
For whatever treatment is available, because she'll be younger than 18. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So Lee Reynolds is here from the FSHD Society. She sort of was the one that brought us all together and got this group going. So we've been doing this for about a year now. And like I said earlier, we kind of just want to look back on what we've done so far last year and kind of lay out some objectives of what we want to do for this year. And then Kristen is the co-chapter director. She's lives in Boston. She has a now 12-year-old. Did she just turn 12?
Turns 12 on Saturday.
12 on Saturday. And Vera, if you would like to introduce yourself. I know she has two small daughters.
Yes. Hi. So we have the diagnosis. No, we first got it from a physiatrist back last October 21. We did Dr. Jones's test, so we've had the official diagnosis for a year now. We got it right before the new year. We did all the blood work. I've always had it. My two daughters have it, obviously much more severe than I do. Our first sign was the hearing loss. So my 5-year-old, she's never been able to run. I feel like her progression was more when she was an infant, but my 6-year-old now has just been rapidly progressing. Just in the last year, like at one point she was doing track, when she was 4, she was doing track, gymnastics, and just in the last year, she can't run, she can't lift her arms, she can't walk downstairs, she can't walk upstairs. Just like every week it's worse.
And John is a regular at our meeting. You have 2 adult children that were diagnosed fairly young. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
So we have an array of ages and severity, but I think the thing that with the early onset, again, regardless of when they were officially diagnosed, the trajectory seems to be it is more severe than the traditional onset. So everybody progresses at a different rate, and there are some interventions I think we can do, physical therapy, nutrition supplements that have helped some, but nothing right now is a treatment. We can help our kids stay. One of our goals is to help our kids stay as mobile as possible. My son's 17. He was diagnosed when he was 6. He was in a wheelchair full time about the age of 13. So kind of along the same lines as Vera and Kate with Kristen. There are a lot of similarities as far as how the disease progresses, and we do have a lot of people in the community like John, whose kids have progressed along the same trajectory, but now they're adults. So there is some commonality between it. And what our goal is to, right now there's a lot of different, and Lee can probably speak to this, there's a lot of different pharmaceuticals and there's a lot of chatter about treatments and drugs and this and that, and clinical trials coming, but none of them are coming to any pediatrics. And from the last year of talking to a lot of researchers and a lot of doctors that have been dealing with FSH for 20 years or more, we have learned that there are certain steps that we need to do to get our kids ready to be clinical trial ready. And part of that is just understanding the disease. Right now, there is not even a paper that's been published about early onset. They've sort of been in the shadows for a long time because the majority of FSH are the traditional onset. So I think in the last year, we've learned a lot. I think we understand now more our path forward, talking to all these clinicians and researchers. And now this year, we just want to move that needle and get our kids clinical trial ready. And the way we need to do that, one of the big things is just have a strong parent advocacy group. And we're all busy. We all have jobs and families and other kids and things, but we need to come together as a unified voice and speak very loudly to those that will listen and even to those who won't listen, to force our hand to say, our kids matter and our kids need to be in this conversation to bring a treatment to them. So with that being said, we sent out a survey a few weeks ago, and we got some feedback from the parents about what they want this group to better help them and how this group can better help them. And we've gotten some good feedback, and what we want to do is unite this group so that we have a unified voice going forward. There are, like I said, a lot of videos on YouTube that can give you a lot of information about the genetics of FSHD, how you can keep your kid more mobile through physical therapy and other things. But now it's time to take that next step and to get some actionable items out there so that we can get our kids in the conversation. I think in this past year, with this group and with the FSHD Society's help, I think researchers and doctors are talking about early onset more than they have been in any sort of recent history. But we don't want it to be well said, we want it to be well done. So we're trying to just, Kristen and I have been working, but we need help with the other parents. And again, there's a wide range of ages here. So we have the data, we have the voices, we just need to bring them together to be heard in a way that the people will listen.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be stated that the drug development process is extremely long and extremely slow moving, much slower moving than any other type of industry we're all probably used to being in. And the issue that is at hand right now, I've been talking to pharmaceuticals researchers, and I've also been talking to experts who are in the drug development process to try and just get a handle on what it is that we need to be doing as parents to try and expedite and move this process along. And where it stands right now is that there is no papers written about early onset as its own. It's mentioned in different pieces that is published on FSHD, but it's not something that is written about. We need a fellow, or we need someone who can write a paper on it. But first and foremost, we need to, as parents, come together and talk about what are the differences that we are seeing, especially those that have FSHD and then are watching their children who have had it. They don't need to be children today. It could be, John, with your children, you would add great value in what you saw and the differences you saw. So right now, we are working to put together a survey that is being we're being helped by some researchers on what those questions need to be in order to help get the conversation started and try and figure out, can we get some sort of research paper written that will be something that is heard and gives the pharmaceutical something to look at, to get the conversation started even further. So what happens in the clinical trial is that they need data and they need to understand the disease in order to create endpoints in the clinical trial process. And right now, because there is no real data on kids, it's been really studied from an adult disease. There's no way for the pharmaceuticals to create clinical trial endpoints. That is why the kids are being left out. We all have a ton of data on our kids. We take our kids to the doctor more than adults go to the doctor. But it's not being collected in a uniform way that can be used by the pharmaceuticals to create these clinical trial endpoints. So first, we need to get a paper written. First, we need to get data that leads a researcher into the right direction to write a paper. In the meantime, also figuring out, is there a way we can take all of our kids' medical records and get them into a database somehow that can be read quicker, faster? Because we do need to get all the kids into the MOVE study for the kids 10 years from now. But for our kids today, we need the data now, because we don't have the 10 years to wait. And nobody in the industry and or at any type of group that can help us has the same urgency that we do as parents. It has to come from us. So we can't sit back and just wait for other people to do this work for us. And Allie and I've been beating the drum for the past year. We've gotten to the point where pharmaceuticals are listening. We have researchers that are talking to us. I'm out there trying to find people who will listen and try and get direction from this as much as possible, but that's as far as we can take it. And at this point, we need people to step in, take pieces off the plate, because Allie and I also both work full time and we have kids who are disabled. So our time is also extremely limited. We can't do this full time. So we need as much hands and as much brains and as much willpower as we can possibly get. So we're now at the point where we can put the plan together. We're working on putting the plan together, but without parents, it's useless. We might as well just give up. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So Christian was talking about the endpoints and outcomes that they need to measure for kids. We spoke to a lady a couple of weeks ago her son has Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and her kid's been in clinical trials for 10 years. And a lot of the time they would go through the trial and then at the end they would say, well, I don't know if this worked or not, because they didn't have the right input, because they didn't endpoints and outcomes, because they didn't talk to the parents. Because a lot of it's subtle, like you said, Debbie, you know, my daughter couldn't blow up a balloon, or, you know, they started struggling at this time, or they were in AFOs at this time, or they couldn't run, or they couldn't walk, or they ended up doing this or that. So we need to gather all the information from parents who know better than anyone else. So our intent is to put out a survey to gather that information from parents, not just to sit on a shelf somewhere, but to use, like Kristen said, for a paper or to put in front of the pharmaceuticals or the FDA or whoever, so that they know that this is what we need to measure, so that our kids, if we get them in clinical trials, when we get them in clinical trials, that they're successful clinical trials and they measure what we want them to measure. Because I can imagine your kid being in a clinical trial for 10 years and then still not have any sort of outcome from that because they were measuring the wrong things. And what she said to us very clearly was the parents need to be involved, because if they're not involved, they're going to measure the wrong things. Or if the researchers don't really understand the trajectory of the disease, then there's no way they can take that forward, even if they do a clinical trial, to the FDA and say this is effective or not effective, because nobody really understands how the disease progresses, especially in pediatrics. So we're going to put out a survey, and I hope that you will participate and get on social media or whoever and say, please participate in this, because this is data that we can use to write a paper, and this is data that we can use to push forward for the clinical trial so that we're measuring the right things. The other thing that Kristen and I are doing, we're putting together a documentary of our kids and kind of how they went from, like Vera said, playing soccer, running, skiing, doing all these things, and then they progress to the point where they're in wheelchairs or they can't walk, or their speech is affected, their pulmonary is affected, the cardiology is affected, all those sorts of things, hearing. It needs to be a comprehensive study so that then they know how to measure the outcome. And that people can see.
The documentary is to go in conjunction at the same time with all of that, because if they can't see the differences in what it is like for the kids, then they don't know, right? They've been studying adults. They don't know. We have to educate the marketplace on what it is for these kids to live this life. You know, my daughter was just at the doctor. I take her to every single doctor I can get my hands on. The poor kid's got 14 doctors. And she said to her last doctor appointment, my goal is someday to have 2 doctors, right? Like, that's powerful for a 12-year-old to come out and say that. Those are the things that pharmaceuticals need to know, because this isn't about just a mobility limiting. This is a health issue at the end of the day. This becomes their lives impacted if they go into wheelchairs. All sorts of other issues happen that are maybe not FSHD, but they're related because they're not mobile. And so, you know, those are the things that need to get across. Because right now, when you read this stuff about FSHD, it's not that big. It's not that life-threatening. We need to let them know it is life-threatening. It is. Our kids' lives could be impacted on the length of them because of this.
Right.
And that's not the conversation being had.
Right. And we didn't come up with this on our own. We've talked to pharmaceuticals. They've joined our meetings, and they said, you know, there's nothing more impactful than seeing it. Mm-hmm. You know, so we need to get a video out there to educate parents, and to educate the FDA and to educate pharmaceuticals about the severity of this disease. So again, we've heard it from their mouths. So now we're trying to take the next step into making that a reality, that let's get our kids in front of them so that they see how it progresses. So we're trying to come at this at a multi-pronged angle to say, we're going to get the videos and the pictures so they can see it, get a paper written, and then get the parents' input on how they see their child progressing, so that then we can put that in front of the pharmaceuticals and say, these are the outcomes that you need to measure, because these are the things that we're seeing, so that we're not wasting time. Because again, time is something that we don't have. And the other thing that we've heard again and again and again from doctors and researchers and pharmaceuticals and everyone that we've spoken to is, you know, time is money when you're doing these clinical trials. Kids progress faster than adults. It makes sense that if you study the kids, you're going to see those. You know, you might study an adult for 4 years, but you have the same progression in the kid in 6 to 8 a year. So they can reach those goals for the clinical trial a lot quicker if you have a kid in there, because they're progressing faster. And if the clinical trial goes faster, it's going to save them time, it's going to save them effort, save them money, and then we can get a treatment not only for our kids but for the whole community. So it's very important that we get our kids in these trials so that maybe we can crack the nut on this thing for everybody. But we need.
I have a couple. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So, you know, you all know so much more about this than I do. It's so new to it, but I just have a couple thoughts because I am really trying to work so hard to learn a lot. And I'm sorry I can't think of the disease, but I think our neurologist had told us about there's some like spinal dystrophy where there is a cure now. You know what it is, Allie. So it just makes me think about, so those are kids, right? They had to have done the trials on kids. I don't know, it just makes me think it would be interesting to learn about like how that came about, that those kids were, I don't know, were treated, that they got that far.
Yeah, I can give you a really very high level view. That is, when it becomes a life-threatening disease, that's when they take action faster. And that is a life-threatening disease proven. Those kids don't live.
Well, and so I know it's like they're very young, and so it is, but I can tell you, as far as I can tell, my daughter doesn't have respiratory problems, but like you're saying, this does happen. It progresses so fast with kids that, so maybe today it's not like, I don't know. I just feel like I want to kind of see the success of that group and try to learn from that to see how we could apply that to our kids.
I think part of it is that for the most part, historically, early onset or infantile FSHD is lumped in with regular onset FSHD. Mm-hmm, and sort of some of the line of discussion is, well, everybody's born with it. It's just a matter of when does it start to show itself. So it's a continuum, and early onset is just this rare subset of an already rare disease. The fact that everything's lumped together under the banner of FSHD, and the parent, it's not really an adult version, it's just the version that the majority of patients have, where the onset and symptoms, you don't really notice them until you're a full-fledged adult. The average might end up in a wheelchair by the time, or needing assistive devices by the time they're 40. Those are the stats you hear told a lot. So that's the narrative. And I think a lot of what Kristen and Allie are trying to do, and we're trying to support them doing that, doing this together, is to increase the narrative and tell a better story about the kids who are impacted, about those that have early onset, because it can't just be, oh yeah, and by the way, there's some kids that get it too. And when they get it, pretty bad.
It seems that people who have lost their lives to it would be the most impactful, that those are the people we need to reach out to.
Yeah, I mean, there is, for me, I didn't know anything about FSHD until I joined the FSHD Society. I've worked in nonprofit for 30 years, lots of different groups, lots of different single disease organizations for most of my career. And I had never heard of FSHD. And then it took me a while of working with FSHD to realize, oh, wait, like early onset infantile is a whole nother kettle of fish, man. That's serious. That is the impact.
It's like people don't believe the severity of it.
Right. You don't
like
realize the severity, you don't recognize it.
So I don't know.
It's
This
just very
I guess,
frustrating.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the other thing we sort of battle, you don't have FSHD in your family, correct? This is like the first.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, we're checking. I think this might be just my daughter, but no, nobody. I mean, like, no, I don't.
So some of the things we battle as well, and maybe Candace can jump in here and speak to this a little more, is, it's in families, and a lot of times they're like, well, there's no treatment, and it's been in our family forever, and this is sort of how it goes. You might start showing some signs, when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, and they slowly progress, and so you sort of battle that we kind of always knew that was in the family, but there's really nothing you can do about it. A lot of times with the spontaneous mutation or the first, or like in Vera's case, just because you have FSHD, like it's not in my family, it's not in Kristen's family, it doesn't sound like it's in yours, or if it is, it's a very, very mild case, like, you can't even really notice it.
People say to me, oh, you seem to be doing fine.
Right. So you kind of think, well, this is kind of how it went for me. And that's kind of how it's going to be for my kid, but that's not always how it is. There's a spontaneous mutation, and you don't know the severity of what your child's going to have or your grandchildren. So it's not always going to follow the same path that you followed or your grandparents followed. So that's kind of another obstacle that we sort of face, that there's the assumption. And again, I think even in my case, if I look back, my son was progressing pretty rapidly, but almost every time I thought, okay, so he's gonna have to wear some AFOs, but then I didn't really think forward that it's gonna keep getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. And now he's in a wheelchair and he's doing okay, but I'm thinking now I'm like, what's it gonna look like 5 years from now? You kind of get stuck in that, this is how he's gonna be, but it's a progressive disease.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
progressing now, that's not how they're gonna be 10 years from now.
I don't know, maybe I'm like so negative because I see my daughter, I feel like her shoulder blades are barely hanging on, that I can't even imagine what she's going to look like in a couple of years.
Right. And that's a tough,
so
it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing for a parent to go, I don't want to see what they're going to be like.
I think that's part of the struggle, right? Is that when parenting is hard anyway, and then you start to parent a kid with special needs or with a progressive disease, it's just hard. It's really freaking hard. And you just try to get through and do the best you can with today, and where are we today, and how do I work for a better tomorrow? But I don't know that I really want to face all that, because that's painful and hard and difficult. And not everybody is willing, as you all are, to walk in that, because facing, looking down the path of what could come is very, very hard. And so how do we tell the story in a meaningful way that we can elevate the voice of early onset and infantile FSHD patients, tell the reality of the story without taking parents who aren't quite so ready to come on this journey and be a part of the solution, and freaking them out to where they go further away from us. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I feel like we have to at least talk about that and acknowledge that different people are in a different place. And I think historically, the FSHD Society, I know that when I first started as just a part-time consultant, there was a tendency to say, well, we don't want to freak parents out, so don't put that picture of that more impacted kid on the website. And let's not talk about it, not because we're trying to hide the truth, but because there was a fear of, are we going to freak people out and scare them off and make it harder than it already is? And I think we can't hide from the reality of what this is. We have to, so everybody knows, I have no background with FSHD. I don't have it in my family, don't know anyone. And while it's not at all the same, I have a son with autism. And so I know a little bit what it's like to face, just the challenges of parenting a kid that is not developing the same as all the other kids on the block, and there's other things that you have to manage and deal with that people don't understand. And hiding from the truth of the story, hiding from the reality that you're facing doesn't help anyone. And we have to figure out how to show the story, tell the story in a meaningful and impactful way that people pay attention. We have to get people to pay attention. And when people pay attention and say, look, those parents were brave, those kids were brave, I'm going to jump in and face it and deal with it too. That's the only way we're going to move this forward. We're talking about creating a movement here. That's really what we're talking about. And there are steps to be done, and there are actions to be taken, and we have to have a clear path forward. And I think this last year has been about a lot of learning and gathering information and starting to understand and just starting to get our legs under us. But we're at a point now where we have to chart a pretty meaningful course forward, so people know what they're rallying behind. And then we got to figure out, once we know exactly what we're going to do, A, so that we can get to B, so that we can get to C, because this is the path we're on. Then people know what they're rallying behind. And in partnership with that, we have to start to elevate the voice and show and tell the story in a meaningful way, because we can't hide the story of impact on these kids because we're afraid we're going to scare somebody, because in the long run, that's doing a disservice to all of the families.
And that is so hardly, because actually Allie and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago when we were talking to Lexi, who's helping us with the documentary. And I'm quite honestly, I'm terrified to let Kate know that this could be her future, right? I want to shield her from that. So part of my thing was doing the documentary was like, how can we lock this down so that only the people we want to see it? That's not going to help with the movement. So to your point, it's careful. It's trying to figure out, how do you tell the story without scaring those that are impacted and the parents that are dealing with those that are impacted. And I don't quite have the answer to that. We need help with that, of people who, I don't know if there's someone in the group that's a marketing expert, but that's what we need to draw on, is the strengths and the differences that parents have to help us with this movement, to help us move forward and figure out, what does this look like? We're going to take a stab at it with Lexi on putting together a documentary. It happens that she lives in Boston, so it's easy for her to come and actually do it in person with Kate, to give a trial run on how this looks, and then be able to broadcast that and figure out, how do we do it with kids across the world, and taking that to the next level with getting the word out there. But how do we do it so that we're not turning people off or scaring them? Because this is ultimately really about getting this in front of the scientists, the pharmaceuticals industry. But in the meantime, we as parents need to start trying to get other parents to figure out what we're doing and add their strengths into helping. Volunteer committees only work when you use the strengths.
Right.
Allie uses the strengths and that she's just great at being focused and moving things forward. And she gives me a list of things I need to do to make phone calls because I'm not scared to call anybody. So we are using the strengths and the free time that we have. And as we go through this, would love to find someone who's really good at social media, really good at marketing, can look at these documentaries, can figure out how that should work. Meanwhile, we'll work with getting the survey going, but somebody who loves data, who can help us figure out, talking to different data companies on, what it is that we can do to get the right information that the data companies need to put a natural history study on steroids, if you will. Everyone collectively using their strengths to help us move this forward so that everybody's taking a little piece of the pie and we can make big things happen if everybody just dedicates that little piece of their pie to the overall goal and movement forward.
I think you're absolutely right, Kristen. It's about compiling the group. There's strength and power in the community that comes together. Everybody has something to contribute to the process. And I think we just need to think a little bit about how do we all, there's marketing and communication to pharmaceuticals and probably to the FDA and to others to get early onset recognized and elevated in the process. But we should also think about how are we marketing to the parents who are sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah,
So,
I think I don't know, I sort of wanted to mention just after Kristen was talking, I really do feel like it depends on who your audience is because Kristen, what you mentioned, I totally agree because I will tell you that a month ago when I first started learning about FSHD, I chose which sites to go to because some were too hard to look at. And so for a new family just learning, I don't think the goal is to show our greatest struggles, but like you're saying, Kristen, it matters when if you're looking to the pharmaceutical companies, if that's who we're showing it to, we want to show how hard our lives are. But for families just learning, we need hope too. So I think
it's so right, Debbie. You're spot on.
So it really, if you're talking about sending this to companies to show this is what our kids go through, this is where my kid is now. My kid used to be an insanely fast runner and we couldn't figure out what was going on. Is it she's a teenager now and she's so tall and she's growing in her body, and she ran cross country and her friends finished, took a break and then came back and finished with my daughter. And so like you said, if you say this year this happened, now this is where my kid is, now I hear her slapping her foot and AFO is going to you want to tell that to all the people who can help us, but I do think there should be different audiences.
I think with any of the footage that we're shooting, I think you can take the same footage and cut it in two ways. So we have to have one that's our movement building, promotional marketing, because we've got to push the story out that exactly right, Debbie, that says, yeah, it's hard and this is the reality, but there's hope and there's action to be taken and there's work to be done and we need you in the fight with us. When you're going out to pharmaceuticals and to FDA and others and saying, wake up, pay attention, we need you, that's different.
Right, this is a serious problem. These kids are not,
and we cannot let these kids get left behind, so I think you can weave the same footage and apply it for two different audiences because we're trying to incite different action and we're trying to a parent, they know how hard their day-to-day reality is. And they're looking for, I may know it's going to get worse and I may know there are hard days, but when I'm coming to a group like this, I want to focus on what can I do about it? How if I'm going to give some of my very limited time and mental and emotional energy to this process, I have to understand what the payoff could be and why the hell am I doing it? Otherwise, I'm just going to go try and take care of my kid and get her to 14 doctor appointments.
Well,
Than what you're telling a pharmaceutical company of why we need you in the fight.
Right, I agree with that. But I think the other thing that's really valuable about this group is we have people who have been through it and we can share our experience and we can help, say this is the mistake I made, or this is what I'm doing. Their physical therapy and nutrition and all these other things, all the financial stuff that we can share and help each other along the way as we're working toward this. I mean, that's really what we want to do. Ultimately, we want our kids in trials and we want a treatment, we want a cure. But while we're doing this, we can help each other out and say, get your kid in physical therapy, keep them moving as much as you can, take them and do a battery of tests on their blood to find out if they're low on magnesium, if they need creatine, if they need vitamin D, make sure they're getting good nutrition and all these things that we have learned and the people that came before us have learned, so that we can support you along the way, because navigating in the world with a kid with a disability is tough.
Yeah.
There's so many obstacles. Just, you think, oh, my kid's in a wheelchair, obviously he's going to have access to this. And there's so many crazy things that I never even thought of, as far as financial stuff and all these things that I need to set up for him, or, I have to do it now. And I can help parents do that, or parents can help me do that. Or how's he going to go to college, or how's he ever going to live on his own, and all these other things that we can help each other out and keep our kids hopefully mobile in their body, ready to receive a treatment, right? Because if they're in a wheelchair and they're all, they have these contractions and they have these things that when the treatment comes along, is their body going to receive it in a way that's going to get them out of the chair and let them live their lives? Mm-hmm. So we can help each other in that way too. Fighting insurance and all the other things that come with it, we can help each other out while keeping our eye on the main goal of we want to get them we want this treatment to come to them.
So with all that's been said and what I'm hearing everyone say and we're trying to digest, and given the fact that we did this survey and got some different feedback from what people want from a group like this, would there be benefit from, maybe we alternate the meetings? This is something Allie and I were touching on right before everybody joined, so that we can have one that we clearly say, this is educational, this is talking about the research and the process and the work that we need to do, and this meeting is for connection, support, community, helping us navigate, life as a parent of a child with FSHD. Because some might not want to jump into this side of things, the research active work, because that sounds like work. That sounds like I'm not ready yet to say I'm signing up to do more. I'm just trying to get through the day. But if they come and they become a part of the community and we're helping them live, find the resources they need, or shortening the time to them figuring something out that somebody else has already been down the pathway, that could be the point of entry to say, I value this community. I value what I've gotten from it, and now I understand and I'm more ready to step in on the other side.
I don't know. I don't really agree with that. I think my only, initiative in coming to these meetings is the hope that we will have a treatment. I think that's every parent's dream, is, to work towards do what we have to do to get our kids included in trials. I mean, that's just me, I can search message boards, based on all the other, coping and the, other, supplements and the physical therapy and all that. But I'm only here. I only want there to be more of a organization to, have a plan how we're going to get our early onset recognized, because it's not recognized. I don't feel FSHD really. I feel it's all Allie. We only ever see Allie talk about infantile and early onset. No, I don't see much coverage for our little ones that are severely affected. That's just how I feel. That's the only reason I'm here now. That's the only reason I'm continuing, communications on social media for all of it. So I think that should be the goal of these groups. And I would like to.
Maybe it comes down to two separate groups where people who do want support, because I completely can understand exactly what Vera is saying from the standpoint that when I started the journey, I didn't want support. I still don't really want that much support. I mean, my people I go to for my support, but I just want to get shit done. And
exactly.
and I want to get things on the road. So maybe it's having the opportunity for those who want to join the crusade in helping Allie and I move the pharmaceutical and the conversation forward. We can have a subcommittee, while the early onset meetings can be more about topics that are important to other people, because everybody has, in a group, everybody has their different interests. So maybe in order to move both forward, it does need to be, it does need to have more of a focus on, this is what needs to be done. This is the part you're signing up to do the work. And then there's the other part where I think it's very valuable for people, but it's not for everybody that wants to hear, how you move things forward. How do you do a 504? How do you do insurance and all of that? So maybe it is two separate initiatives, where one is very tactic and driven, and the other one is more about, how do we survive? How do we move? How do we keep our kids as healthy as possible while we go through the
one would be a
stuff.
feeder for the other,
And one could be the feeder for the other.
The goal would be that one would be a feeder for the other, because some people aren't action oriented as you all are. If they were, there might be some more people on some of these meetings.
Or they also can see that we're moving the needle, then maybe they can also, it'll give them more initiative to move forward. And that's what Allie and I've been working towards when talking to different consultants and industry experts of, what is the plan, right? Because back to your point, Debbie, like, we didn't know a thing when we started this. It was like, the two of us have been trying to figure out this crazy drug development process that is just insane with the number of steps. It's a marathon and then some. And trying to figure out, how do we get a plan that makes sense, and pushing forward. So we feel like we can get some movement with the documentaries we're going to try and create, and the survey that we're getting some industry experts to help us with. We're also going to try and figure out, how can we get back in front of the FDA for the early onset, and make that noise. But it's all of these things take time, effort, resources, and we're just trying to do it bootstrap on less than a part-time schedule.
Mm-hmm. I just want to make sure everybody's seeing the chat too. Candace has chimed in a couple things, and her last point was that it's important for those wanting to get things done to also be involved in the community side, so that needs aren't lost in one group to the other. And I totally agree, Candace. There has to be linkage, and there has to be intention in the more support side of things that is intentionally supportive towards engagement. I mean, support is good and valued and important, and we obviously, but I think there would be, for sure, there'd need to be some linkage to try and hopefully move people to action as well.
Yeah, I really like the idea of two groups, because I'm there with you. I will do whatever we can to draw attention to this and get our kids involved. But I'll tell you, as Ellie's talking, I'm like, vitamin D, magnesium, there's so much I don't know yet. So, I feel like getting information from other parents could be helpful too.
So that brings me to sort of what I was thinking about coming into this meeting is, maybe, last year we just had all informational meetings. We had a lot of experts on, and again, these are all archived, and you go back and look at them. Maybe every other month we have an expert come on and talk about something, but on the off months we get together and say, kind of digest that and say, okay, how can I help you get through this? Because again, we all want a cure. I want a cure. I wanted a cure 10 years ago when my son was still walking. But I also, again, want his body to be able to receive a treatment when it comes, and that's rapidly deteriorating. And what can I do to support him, and what kind of things do we need to navigate? So maybe every other month we meet, maybe regroup, digest some of the things that we talked about, because again, FSH is a complicated disease. The researchers and the big brains even say this is a really complicated, the geneticists say this is so complicated, and we just found out that DUX4 was the culprit of all this stuff not that long ago. So they're still trying to figure it out as well as while they're trying, to run these clinical trials. They'll be the first one to say, I don't know everything about FSHD. These are the things we've learned so far, right? So maybe we come back and digest that every other month and say, what do you need? Because I'm hearing a lot of things, like, again, from the survey, some of the topics of interest are like, they want the kids to connect. What does that look like? Do you want our kids to, I don't know, my son is willing to talk to kids, that overwhelmingly 70% said they wanted their kid to connect with another kid with FSH so that they don't feel alone. We can satisfy that somehow if we come together and talk about that. Or, I want to learn about nutrition. I want to learn about exercise. I want, what can I do now? And what you can do now is enroll your kid in the MOVE study. And it doesn't matter what stage they're in. If they're mildly affected or severely affected, because we need that natural history. So I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe every other month, I don't know, we have a meeting more to support those things. Because again, I mean, I'm just coming at you from experience. I think Kristen's way ahead of me on this, as far as, she's been more aggressive about getting her kid in physical therapy multiple times a week and getting on the stuff. And I was a little bit late to the game because, again, I don't know, complacent, or I just didn't know what I didn't know.
When Sam was diagnosed, the doctor said there's nothing you can do.
Right.
So we need to get that word out, because I don't want anybody else to fall into that. There's nothing we can do. There are some things we can do to help our kids now.
Can I tell you what's really disappointing is so my daughter's name is Maggie, and her neurologist, she was telling us, okay, you shouldn't play tennis, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this. Now, I think there's some truth to that, because I don't want the shoulder to be damaged, but I'm telling you, in December 2022, a doctor who was a neuromuscular specialist was telling us we should not overuse the muscles. Now, everything I've seen is that doesn't necessarily apply to FSHD, that it's other muscular dystrophy. So, I mean, that is like, I
Dawn, you want to weigh in
that's
on
like
that one?
malpractice.
Right. I mean,
like, it's terrible information. And so, I mean, I'm just saying right now, like you're talking about when your son was younger. Well, right now people are being told the wrong thing.
Exactly. That's my point. And there's a lot of other things too, like putting the stuff in their eyes and all these things that you need to know that nobody's telling you, because a lot of the neurologists you're taking your kids to, they have no clue about FSH. They don't. They know very little about it. When now, I'm sure Kristen will tell you the same thing. Now, when we go to our neurologist, unless you go to one of the clinical trial networks that you get a doctor who is very versed in it, we're educating them. We're saying, no, this, and this is happening. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that, right? Because they just, they deal in a neuromuscular clinic, and they deal with a lot of different muscular dystrophies, and they really aren't that versed in FSH. And, there's a lot of things that we can do. And my doctor told me the same thing. You're going to damage him if you let him do this and you let him exercise. And I never stopped him. But, he'll let you know, like my son will let me know. I never stopped him from exercising, but the whole time I was like, oh my gosh, I'm making him worse. And now all of that has changed. Now they're like, you need to be in physical therapy. You need to be as active as you can. You need to keep the muscles that are still working as strong as they can to support the other ones. But 10 years ago, they tell me the same thing. And probably those same neurologists that you're talking to are reading, I don't know, old documentation.
It's really shocking to me, because she's a specialist who's like a fairly new doctor who's on a muscular dystrophy team now. And maybe it's because that's the case with most muscular dystrophies, but we were definitely told the wrong information 1 month ago. So
I think that speaks to the power of having an active and engaged early onset community, because there's great knowledge that comes collectively from all of you talking to each other, your shared experience. Sometimes the parents and the families know far, far more than the researchers because of lived experience. And the research hasn't gone back and written a paper on it. And if the research hasn't gone back and written a paper on all the things that parents and families know, then it's not recognized by the medical community as official. So it's, in my mind, that's a continuum, right? So if we want to get early onset kids in the research and get them in the pipeline for approval of therapies. We have to improve our knowledge and our collective understanding and keep these kids, as healthy as we possibly can, as long as we can, to make them better prospects for the therapies that are coming. That's going to come from collective understanding.
Right. And
Lot of
like,
it right now.
and the doctors will want to do multiple surgeries on your kid too. And you need to be informed about, like Kristen, like my son's had multiple surgeries because one of them he's had spinal fusion surgery, and he had to have spinal fusion surgery because his spine was twisting so bad, it was putting pressure on his heart and his lungs. I didn't really have a choice for that. Like I had to do that to save his life. But the surgeries before them, the tendon releases and all these things, when he went through those, he declined because he wasn't active. And if you look at Candace's chat here, she's an adult with FSH. Her loss of ability started when she was on bed rest for a pregnancy, when she, was sedentary. And she treasures those memories of having gone out and done all these things, right? So these are the kind of conversations we need to have as parents. Again, you're going to make the best decision you make for your child, right? You're going to do what's best for your kid, and you know them better than anybody else. But you can learn from each other. And I know Kristen calls me and says, hey, the doctor's thinking about having this surgery. How'd it go for Sam? I mean, and I just tell her point blank, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have had those early surgeries probably because he declined so much. And he will tell you that. He's like, I wish I never would have had that. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was going to keep him walking longer. And in the end, I don't know that it did or didn't, but it didn't keep him walking much longer. And it may have hindered him walking longer. So you just have to be informed and having these connections and be able to pick up the phone and say, my kid's going through this, or email somebody, or, I could email John and say, how did your kid cope with getting out on their own? I mean, that's valuable stuff. Now, it doesn't take away from the fact that our main goal is to get our kids in treatment. Absolutely. But we can support our kids along the way and try and give them the best outcome possible.
And I think that is a powerful thing where it can come in the form in any which way you want that. Whether you need it in a meeting like this, or whether it's you find someone that you have that really strong connection with, where you have each other's cell phone numbers and you can call and have those conversations. I think that it's a lonely path if you don't have someone that you can refer to. And I will say that when Allie and I first connected, with Sam being so much older than Kate, I really didn't want to know Sam's story. Back to the point, Debbie, of like, you don't want to see what the future holds. But the more I embraced it and realized that learning from it helped, she basically saved Kate from going through 2 surgeries that she wouldn't have necessarily really needed, because we had the collective information, and I was able to have the conviction to push back on the doctors that I would not have had if I didn't have the knowledge coming from her experiences.
And I don't know, maybe my reaction too is because I'm only a month into this, so it's very fresh. And so, I think I'm to the point now where I'm like, I'm ready to fight. And, so I think it's easier to see what could happen. It's much easier than 2 days after learning it, when it's like there's this period of grieving, I guess. So
yeah, we all go through that. It ebbs and flows, right?
Grieving never stops.
Yep.
yeah.
Some days are easier than others, but it's a never-ending cycle.
I think John was trying to.
Ali, you were correct when you mentioned. I talked to Dr. Jones, and we discussed the need. He discussed with me the need for blood work. In other words, you mentioned it before. There was no biomarkers used for any type of blood work. Okay, in other words, you take people, the different families, the children, the blood work. Is there anything that's trending in any direction that can make a difference? Like you said, check for magnesium, check for vitamin D levels, check all these things. I just recently had all that stuff done because I requested my PCP to do it. My neurologist would never do those tests. So you can request those tests be done by your primary, where a neurologist will say, no, there's no need for it, because some of the tests that I wanted, my own doctor said, Well, yeah, I'll do the test, but I don't know how to read it. In other words, they can't
Yeah.
make a diagnosis from that result. So I
So-
think to have, something set up where blood work can be done, nutrition status, your serum protein. In other words, how much protein is in your blood. That's a real important one because I watch mine, okay, very carefully. It was always low. Now I got it up where it's normal. So progression is not there. So there's a lot of those things that neurologists don't even look at. Not even close. You can talk to them about it and they'll say, we don't know anything about it.
Right, and I think it's really important to get that blood work done because you don't want to just throw things because you can hurt your kid by giving them too much of this or that. So get the
Yeah.
blood work done, get a whole battery done, and figure it out. Where they're lacking or what you can do. And nutrition and exercise and all those other things. You need to be informed going in.
Right. But just to take a supplement without a control is not good to do. In other words, a control would be, yes, determine if the blood work determines that you need it, but not to take it if you don't need it. That can cause harm in its own.
So Candace shared that her vitamin D was never low until she started progressing, and it would be interesting to see how these dips correlate with the active progression versus times of no change. Good point, Candace.
And so the other thing with the MOVE study, they took blood from me and my son's dad and him, and who knows if we get more people enrolled in this MOVE study, maybe they will start making some of those correlations. But they need to study it. But again, it takes time, and time is something that we don't have, honestly. But the MOVE study is important, and all these other things we're working for is important, and to make sure that we have the best information we have for our kids and for ourselves if we have it, to stay as healthy as you can because, like Candace, she's trying to stay healthy herself and Vera and then keep their kids healthy. I mean, that's tough. But you have to have the right information going forward.
Yeah.
While we're fighting for this. So I guess I just, there's not many of us on here. It'll be recorded and sent out, and maybe someone will contact me. But just for the group here, what do you guys think about having, more guest speakers on? And then every other month, maybe come back together and have a forum like this. Maybe we can catch up, like Chris and I can give you an update on, okay, we've talked to this and this is where we're at. In the documentary, this is where we're at, and getting someone to write the paper, this is where we're at, and getting the survey, and kind of update you, and then share so many information or answer questions, and then bring on an expert in a different field, in a different subject area to come on and educate. You guys find that, you think that's going to be a useful format or no?
I'm most interested in being educated on how to get our kids involved. I know what Debbie brought up, I don't know what disease she was referring to when she said a spinal disorder that was cured for children. I don't know if maybe people, I'm sorry?
It's SMA.
Yeah, that's what it is.
SMA?
Mm-hmm.
Spinal
So that's
I'm going to research that more.
But that's something they test for as soon as the baby's born now.
Well, I guess my point is that's rare also, and I know like it truthfully is more severe, but like they decided like we are going to attack that. So I guess I just thought if how could we learn from that and see if they can start working on attacking FSHD a little bit
They
better.
had all the documentation on the disease. They knew how to create it, and it's also so rare and in children that they didn't need to test that many people. And it is just children. That's all they had to focus on for it. So it was advocates, it was parents raising up and doing what we're talking about right now. That's who I've been in touch with. One of the women who did this for Duchenne's. That's who we're working with developing the survey. And so, but I mean, Vera, if you can find another person who was doing the advocacy work for that, yeah, let's game on. Let's go. As many people who can do research
For the SMA, this is the first, yeah.
I mean, that's what it seemed to me like. That's like, because I know they're doing like gene therapy for sickle cell anemia, but for some like something
Yeah.
that's most similar. That I mean, that's like the neurologist that you guys know sort of how much I trust her now, but she said like, well, they're doing this for SMA, so like, they're going to be able to cure this in 5 years. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, maybe for adults, but we've got these kids have to be involved, just like those. I understand SMA was only for kids, but I guess in my mind, I do sort of think of these kids I know it's the same disease, but there are big differences, and these kids need to be helped.
So Candace, I think Kate, I don't want to speak for Kate, but I think Kate would be willing to, you talked about, you don't know how to go forward with your kid, and maybe you want them to talk to another child. I think Kate has said in the past that she's willing to speak to other kids, right, Kristen? My son is willing to talk to, and again, I don't want to be Debbie Downer here. My son is happy. He's smart. He's graduating. He has a career path. He's doing all these things. It's not like, there's, no hope. He's living his life. And he can probably, and just like Kate, she's an active girl, lots of friends, they're living their best life that they can, and they can share some of these things with other kids.
Your son, he's 17 now. So like,
Yes.
it worries me, honestly, because you're the most active member, who's your son's going to be an adult in a few months, and, you're not going to have the same passion to, have our kids included. I mean, not to say you won't lose sight of your goal, but it's the reality.
Well, I will tell you that I wish somebody would have done this 10 years ago. And that's what drives me. Maybe if somebody would have done this 10 years ago for my son, then we wouldn't be talking about it now. And I'm not going to lose sight of it. But if somebody else wants to take over this group that has a younger kid, and they can serve the community better than me, I'm willing to do that. I just want this thing cured. But I will tell you, I'm driven for all the kids. And just because my kid's turning 18, it doesn't necessarily mean, because he's not ambulatory. They might get a treatment for someone who's ambulatory, and my son might not qualify for it. So I'm fighting for all the kids, and I'm fighting for my kid and everybody in every condition. And I will tell you right now, I'm not losing sight of it. If I may need to move on in a couple of years, that's fine. I'll hand over the reins. I just want this thing cured. So
Here, I won't let her go anywhere. Don't worry.
Okay. That's reassuring. Thank you.
We're not letting go of her if we can help.
But there is truth to what she said, in that the clinical trial that has gone on with Fulcrum is very much, they're looking for people who are mildly affected, and that will probably be what the label reads. So people who are not walking will not have access to that drug should it actually get approved. So people who are really, no matter what age they are, there's limitations to the access points to these drugs. And so the more we can educate the community that it's the pharmaceutical community, that this is not just a mildly affected disease, the more we can hopefully open up their eyes to creating clinical endpoints for people who are more affected than mildly. Is that said rightly?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's no one treatment or one cure. It's really treatment and cures.
Yep.
And, we all the marketing speak says treatment and cure, but we know that it's multiple cures, because there's the cure for the people that have barely begun to actualize the impacts of the disease. There's the cure that stops it from being passed on. There's the cure for people that are moderately effective. There's a cure for people. There's muscle regenerative work to be done. There's how do we help people that have lost function regain. There's many layers, to the onion and to the process. And so there's a lot to be done.
Yes.
And I think the ultimate goal for this group is to say, how do we take everything we've learned from the last year and the increased knowledge that we have and say, let's chart a meaningful course forward that we know what the ultimate end goal is, but what's the short-term goal that's going to help us get there and track towards that progress. I like how you laid that out, Allie, that you'd say these are our major initiatives. We're going to make sure that in every meeting, whether it's with the speaker and there's learning involved, or whether it's more on the support side of things, that there's 5-10 minutes at every one of those meetings that here's a report of progress on where we are on these key initiatives, and here's where you can step in, where we need your help, where you can help ensure that we're successful, so that it stays top of mind. We have to talk about it over and over and over again. And it's you guys work on the sort of the marketing components in this video. Kristen, don't hesitate to call me if I can help directly, specifically with that. I'm kind of decent hack at some of that stuff. So
yeah, and I think also what would be helpful is just setting goals when we're at this meeting, like what do we want to achieve for the next meeting. So I will make the commitment that I will get this documentary done by the next meeting. I'll figure it out with the limited time in that we have right now, but and we'll take a first stab at it with Kate being just a guinea pig because we are right next to the producer. And then we can share it and everybody can give their opinions on how does it feel? Is this the right format? Because then we can rinse and repeat with all of your children as well.
great.
And there's also the film coming out with, I don't know if you guys saw on like Instagram, but there's, I'm sure he has early onset, the Good Bad Things film, but I'd be interested in seeing what that's about.
So it's
They've done
not
a
a
lot of-
documentary. It's a feature. It's not a documentary. It's a scripted film. It is the lead actor and his best friend wrote it. He has FSHD. I'm pretty sure it was early onset. It's due to come out this summer and we are in talks with them. So we've been talking to them through the process, and we'll probably get the FSHD Society. We'll probably get some early sort of screening opportunities. I think there'll be some opportunity to leverage that as they start to go to film festivals and other things. I
think it could bring a lot of awareness.
Bring a lot of
early
awareness
onset.
and attention to it. Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. So we will work on this survey with the Duchenne's group that we've been consulting with, and I will work on the documentary. And anyone else, Vera, go find out everything you can about how that other drug got approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if I just emailed you, Allie, I mean, I guess you have all of our email addresses, but I don't know. I would like to be in touch if there's, I don't know, some little task I can try to do, or because
Awesome.
I don't know, whatever.
I mean, do you think would I don't know, someone from the FDA come to one of our meetings or something like that? I don't even know where to start.
So-
could we have a representative come?
One of the things that we've been talking about in the office is trying to organize a listening session with the FDA that the FSHD Society would be more than happy to. We know the folks at the FDA, we did the voice. It's not, a listening session is not the same as the voice of the patient that we did a few years ago. It's a little more targeted and focused. And it's to tell this story and to get the FDA to listen to the story. It needs to have, I'm talking out of my depth here. This is much more, June and Jamshed than me. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a government policy person. But we're trying to figure out to get a listening session with the FDA is not hard. To make sure it's really effective and hits all the right points, you got to put some intention behind it. We're trying to figure out what is the right story to tell. What do we want them to hear? We just know it's in relation to early onset specifically. So we're exploring getting something like that scheduled and what are all the right things we want to hit on where they would hear from early onset families specifically.
We have had pharmaceutical representatives at these meetings, several of them, in fact, and that's why we're pressing forward with what we're pressing with. They're like, we need a visual in front of these pharmaceutical companies. And that's what that's the advice they gave us, and that's what we're doing.
And with the FDA, we're not going to get them to come to this meeting, but we can figure out a way to get down and speak in front of them. We'd have to go to DC, but we can figure out a way to do that. We just need to get our act together, our documentaries together, our stories together, and our facts together. And that we can do quickly if we all just put our minds to it. So the first step is got to figure out this survey that they were talking about with getting the right information in place. We need to see if we can get a fellow who will write a paper, and in the meantime work on the documentaries, but also doesn't stop us from having those conversations with the FDA right now to try and get a meeting on the books, because it's not like they have a lot of open time. So it could take us, starting now, it could take us 9 months. So if someone wanted to take that as an initiative to research, how do you actually get a group to go down and get a meeting with the FDA for a specialized disease, that would be super helpful, because we haven't even begun to tackle that yet.
I'm going to drop a link in all about FDA patient listening sessions. Let me drop that in the chat, because so you know what I'm referring to when I'm saying we're. Because there is a specific mechanism for that. Oh, thank you, Wilson. There is a specific mechanism for that through the FDA listening session. That we just need to we need to, as you said, Kristen, we need to get our act together, and make sure we know, because you're not going to get two, right? So
Right.
You're going to get one. So let's make sure we know exactly what we want to talk about and what the outcome goals are, and what information do we need to bring to be truly effective, and what are we really asking them to hear and process, and how do we make sure that story comes across. So there's organization that needs to happen to get a patient listening session with the FDA, but there's a mechanism in place for it. And I think this is versus just showing up and knocking on people's doors and doing Capitol Hill visits. I've done that too, but this gets you the right audience with the right group. We just need to frame the messaging.
Yep. So I unfortunately have to jump for bedtime, but thank you all. This is great to see. We don't get many parents on, so it was really great to actually have everyone on and contributing, and now we just got to make it happen, right?
One step forward at a time. We just got to keep pushing.
Thank
Yep.
you very much for everything you guys have done to get this ball rolling. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
so it's been
thank
a
you
lot of
guys,
work on Allie's part. So everyone, a round of applause for her.
Well, no, it's Kristen and Lee as well, but we've taken the first step. Now we just need to stay persistent and have some tenacity and stick with it, and get this and follow through and get this done. But thank you all. It was so nice talking with all of you. And you can always email me and we can talk. And Kristen has connections, so we'll get this done. And the FSHD Society has connections to a lot of researchers and pharmaceuticals and things. So we have the connections. We just need to stay persistent. And best of luck with your kids. And we'll see you next month.
Thank
Keep
you,
in touch.
Allie.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Kristen.
Thank you guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.